Hello, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 3 of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. I'm Becca, and this is a podcast that features members of the Virtual Coffee community. Virtual Coffee is an intimate group of developers at all stages of their coding journey, and they're here on this podcast sharing their stories and what they've learned. And we're here to share it with you. Here with me today is my co-host, Dan.
Thanks, Becca. This week, we got the chance to sit down with Jennifer Konikowski. Jennifer has been a software engineer for over 10 years, has worked with a million different languages, and helped found and organize PyLadies Boston and Boston Ruby Women. She's currently a senior engineer at Splice. We had a great time chatting with Jennifer. She talked about her experiences building communities, how she approached navigating different workplaces through her career, and she shared some hot takes to get us through the week. I had a great time talking with Jennifer, and I know you're going to enjoy it.
We start every episode of the podcast like we start every virtual coffee. We introduce ourselves with our name, where we're from, what we do, and a random check-in question. Today's question is, which vegetable is best with cheese? We hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm Becca. I am a front-end developer from a small town in Ohio, and the best vegetable with cheese is most definitely broccoli. There's no other right answer.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a front-end developer from Cleveland, Ohio. And yeah, this question is bizarre. I don't really like broccoli with cheese. Like, I prefer broccoli just without cheese. If I had the option between the two, I would choose no cheese.
Cheese and rice, broccoli casserole, okay?
Is potato a vegetable?
Yes,
that's going to be my question.
I don't know if it is or not. That's going to be my answer for sure. If not,
root vegetable.
Okay, so I'll take it. I'm stealing potato. That's my answer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I am a senior backend software engineer at Splice. I'm out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm also like, if potatoes are considered a vegetable, I guess potatoes. You know, who doesn't love some poutine, cheesy fries? You know.
Yeah, that is a good call. I was thinking like maybe you were just putting it on your mashed potatoes.
No, I don't. If potatoes aren't fried, I generally don't eat them.
I'll eat mashed potatoes, but again, without cheese. But like, there's a lot of fried situations that I think cheese.
Like mashed potatoes with cheese and bacon and I don't eat.
I can see that.
Like Greek yogurt.
Like a baked potato, good with cheese.
Yes. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here and tolerating my strange question for our intro.
I had to miss virtual coffee this week, so to be honest, this is my comeuppance.
Oh yeah,
I had to get at least one weird question this week to answer.
Well, Tuesday was all kinds of weirdness at the beginning. We won't go there because it got a little dark, but we're glad to have you here with us today. And we always like to get started with your origin story. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to this point?
Oh boy. Honestly, I grew up in Alabama. I wanted to leave Alabama, and at the time my best bet was to decide to start as a biomedical engineer at Georgia Tech. Soon after, I was like, I don't want to do that, and switched a couple of times, ended on industrial engineering. Really enjoyed that, actually. I've focused in statistics and operations research. Super fun. Through that, Georgia Tech actually makes all their students take at least one computing class. I had 2 extra as part of my program. And I think that ended up putting me in a good position because when I was graduating, I didn't have the highest GPA. So I was going in the career fair to like all the companies that had shorter lines that like weren't as cool. And I ended up getting a job at Home Depot as it's a weird job title. IT developer. That's what it was. It was pretty similar to a project management position. And from there, I had thought I would be doing more development per the job title. And there were a few things that for me, I actually overall, I think, had a pretty good experience with Home Depot as a company, but my particular team was a bit of a disaster, which I think is sort of a theme throughout my whole career. And at a certain point, I'm like, it's look at the common denominator. I'm like, oh crap, maybe it is me. Hopefully not, though. I think I'm just really bad at choosing where to work. Which I swear, Splice is great.
So far, so good.
But yeah, so far, so good. So I changed jobs. I joined the deliverability team at MailChimp for a couple of years, and then I moved up to Boston. And at that point, obviously with a job in email delivery, there's not that many. It's hard to find another place where you can do that without going against an actual non-compete and dealing with trade secrets. So I was like, okay, I definitely can't go get a job at Constant Contact because there's no way MailChimp wouldn't go after me. So I'd learned some Python. So I'm like, I guess now I can be a developer. And this was back when this was October 2012. So mostly pre-boot camps. So caveat, this is, I feel like, an origin story that is really hard to come by these days, where I got hired to be a warm body as a contractor through like a sort of third party at TripAdvisor. And it got me some experience without having to do almost anything in the interview. And, from there, I worked at a variety of startups in the Boston area. I also worked at Akamai for a couple of years, moved to Pittsburgh. Since then, I worked at Stitch Fix for a couple of years, Testable for one. I've been at Splice for now a little over 2 months. Or no, exactly 2 months. So
Nice.
and I've mostly done Ruby on Rails, primarily backend, but as I'm sure a lot of people listening to this know, it's very hard to get away from being full stack.
Yeah, I know. So you've done a lot of work, I think, throughout that time with community and building community. And I think thinking about your origin story and all of the different steps of your journey to get where you were, I'd love to talk a little bit about why you decided to start PyLadies when you were in Boston, or what was the thing that made you think I need to start working to build community for women and minorities in tech?
So, I mean, I think mostly since I've started in the workforce and had any sort of power, I've personally always felt the need to try and bring people up with me. And I know, so when I was in Atlanta, my friend Laura had started PyLadies Atlanta, and we were just a little study group of people trying to learn Python. And that helped me so much. And that when I moved to Boston, I wanted to do that in Boston as well, because I saw Boston has this really great Boston Python group. They're wonderful, but at the same time, the group is massive. And I know for me, it was really intimidating to go, especially because it's all dudes. It didn't matter that they were generally extremely kind and welcoming. If you go in a room with 200 people and there's maybe only, 10 women, even if I'm generous, let's say 40 out of those 200, it still feels very overwhelming. So I wanted a safe place for women to come and learn Python, maybe just experience it. And even though I was a Ruby developer at the time, the reason I sort of chose Python is because as much as I love Ruby, the community is entirely focused pretty much on web applications and APIs, which are great. I love them. That's what I do. But I find that Python has more applications outside of being a software developer. Data scientists use Python, academics use Python. I knew a lot of linguists actually who were part of PyLadies Boston. And I thought that was cool. And if my overall goal was part of my goal was to also teach more women how to code, not even necessarily make them software developers, but to be like, hey, this is a thing. It's not actually that hard. Like, you can do it. And it will help you do your job faster and more efficiently. And you don't have to become a software developer. You can learn this skill and it can benefit you where you are. But obviously, I also wanted to help if people were interested in career switch. I wanted to do everything I could to support them in that. And so, and I was also, as a Ruby developer, my friend Melissa Z started Boston Ruby Women. And so I would go to that. I was one of the founding members of that group, and I would help organize that. And for both of those groups, I would host like weekly study sessions. For Boston Ruby Women, I'd be like, oh, like I'm going to be at this. I think it was I went to Area 4 in Kendall Square, and I'd be like, I'm going to be here from 12 to 1 during my lunch break. Come meet me. Like, I'll answer any questions that I can. I'll help you work through things. I'll talk about job applications. I'll review your resume. Like, literally whatever you want. I'll be there. I'm hanging out here for you. And then for PyLadies, I do the same thing on the weekend. I used to try to do like some sort of class, and I found that it was really hard to get people to stick with something at the same pace. So having it be more open-ended, I think, was better for everyone, because otherwise people would be like, oh, I couldn't make it to this one, so now I'm out. Which is the thing that I think maybe if I'd made people pay for it, they would have stuck with it. But at the same time, like, I wanted this to be accessible for everyone. And I know a lot of people who have gone to boot camps, and I know a lot of great developers out of boot camps, but I feel like boot camps are really expensive. And one thing that I saw in Boston that I really didn't like was that the boot camps were advertising themselves as the only way to get into tech and to switch careers. And that, I really didn't like that, because a lot of people were switching careers because they were not in a good space with their job, and they were not making that much money. So to be like, oh, the only way to switch is because you pay us $15,000. And I'm like, no, like, I mean, you could do that if that's the best fit for you. Maybe you need like the extra accountability, the extra classes. But one of my big things is I feel like the community should be able to be providing those mentoring resources that people say they get out of boot camps. You should not only be able to find that in boot camp. You should not be able to only network if you went to a boot camp. You shouldn't be able to only like learn in a group setting in a boot camp. So I felt like, as a member of the community, like, I wanted to do everything that I could to sort of build that up. And fortunately, Pittsburgh's a lot smaller. So I didn't really do the same thing in Pittsburgh, because at the time, maybe I would now, but at the time we had Girl Develop It. And I felt like we weren't big enough to really have like competing women's development groups. And of course, now Girl Develop It sort of imploded. But maybe I'll revisit later, because it is obviously a passion of mine.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh surprisingly has a lot of tech stuff already going on, which is really nice to see. And I think, I want to hit on this idea that you were talking about, having community as part of the learning experience. And I think one of the things about boot camps that is tough is it just kind of puts you in this place where you only talk to the people in your boot camp. And so it doesn't exactly mimic the larger experience of what being a developer is, and communicating with other people at all different stages in what you're working on, right? And so you just kind of have this insulated experience But if you're working with a community of people, or if you're developing this open conversation, it allows you to create, I think, good habits of communication, maybe, or something that could really be one of those things that allows you to be really successful in ways that boot camps don't.
Yeah, I like a lot of the stuff you said. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about like, so with your groups, you did study groups, right? So open-ended study groups. Can you just like run me through like what one session, what would happen, at a study group, in particular,
It
like
would
at one
really,
specific one.
yeah, it would really depend on who came. So like one example is over the period of weeks, this one woman um, came regularly and was trying to find a job. So part of what I did was actually just encourage her and tell her that like I knew where she was. So I'm like, I know you have the skills to do this. Like I think you should apply. And, absolute worst thing is you get rejected, but I think you have a really good chance of getting this job. I helped her review her resume and make it pop a little bit more and emphasize she was coming from the restaurant industry and was applying to he was a program, no, it was project manager position at a tech company. Because that was a particular position that I felt like that she was interested in that would take the skills she already had professionally and could work them into a much higher paying job.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that would happen. But then sometimes people would come in and be like, "Oh, I'm working through this section of this tutorial. I don't understand for loops." And I would try to go through it with them, give examples, walk them through maybe like, because I think sometimes people need like a number of different examples or to hear things a different way. So maybe like the first thing I say like doesn't make sense. And I just be like, okay, let me try another thing. And I'd give sort of like another type of example of how this is supposed to work.
Yeah, totally.
And eventually, like eventually they get it. And occasionally someone would come with some sort of like pandas question. And I'm like, we can try and struggle through this together, but I don't know pandas.
Yeah.
So FYI.
That sounds really cool. And so like, and this was pre-COVID or whatever, right?
Oh yeah.
So like, would it be people would just like all bring their laptops and sit around a circle, or I mean, I'm just trying to because I'm
around
used
the table.
to like, I've been to a lot of meetups that are mostly just presentations and social time afterwards or whatever. And this sounds a little bit more, a little different of an experience that I'm really interested in.
So I feel like it was similar to the size of like the virtual coffee breakout rooms because the group wasn't neither of these groups were huge. Well, by numbers, PyLadies Boston was huge, but the number of people who come to the actual big monthly meetups wasn't that big. And the number of people who come to these were maybe 3 to 7.
Yeah.
So I'd just be hanging out in this coffee shop and we'd just sort of take over a table.
Yeah.
I didn't get space, but yeah, I think that's another thing is for me, I've also overall like Boston Ruby Women, we basically didn't even do presentations at all. It was more, but I think this is in a way like more relevant for women and underrepresented minorities. Oftentimes like it really helps to have a group where you can talk about like what's going on at work and the other people in the group like really understand because they're in very similar situations. So Boston Ruby Women, it was borderline just a Ruby women's happy hour that got sponsored by Thoughtbot. So we'd just like chill out at Thoughtbot half the time and be talking about like what's going on at our jobs. And with PyLadies Boston, I also didn't want it to be presentations all the time. Because it's as an organizer, it's really hard to actually get a monthly presenter, like someone who wants to present every single month. And one of the things I ended up doing was rotating. So I'd have presentations one month, lightning talks the next, a panel usually about work. Those were very popular. So I'd get like 6 different women at sort of like different stages in their career and doing different things to answer questions about like what they do and like what work is like, what problems they run into. What else did I do? Oh, I started doing mob programming, which was also fun. It was hard to get people to want to volunteer.
Can you describe what mob programming is real quick?
Sure. Mob programming, at least the way we did it, it's generally the whole room is looking at the same problem. So the other thing, I would usually put myself up as a guinea pig for any of these. Like I always had to have a presentation ready or some code, because if we ran out of time, I'm like, well, got to keep it going. And so, for example, I had this silly Python game that I'd written a while back and took it up there, and I would run people through like the premise of what was going on in the code, and then ask for suggestions on things that I should consider changing, or like what they see that could be improved, anything like that. So it's pretty fun. Not a ton of places do it at work, but occasionally people do. It's sort of like pairing with a massive group.
Yeah.
So if you're in a good environment, it can be really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, we tried that one. We tried it once with the Cleveland React meetup, and it was interesting. I feel like with some practice, though, yeah, you can make it like a pretty cool thing. That's awesome. I love how the concentration of like the small groups and the kind of like the less of, just like you said, the happy hour, like less of talking of technical issues and more of just like, community support and like just coming together,
Yeah.
That's
also with our lightning talks, one of the things I encouraged was just like you can give a lightning talk on anything, because I wanted it to be a good place to encourage women to feel comfortable giving presentations. So like one of our members did a presentation that everyone loved on birds and like bird watching, and there were plenty of people who did technical topics, but I think oftentimes, and I still feel this way. I like, when it comes to submitting a talk to a conference, I'm like, I'm not an expert on any technical topics, so I can't give a talk on any of those. And I know that's not necessarily a healthy thing to think about, but at the same time, I know that's what a lot of people feel. So I didn't want to be forcing people to give technical talks and have that be the only option. I felt like you need to build up confidence in other ways, like be okay with public speaking first and then deal with the insecurity around giving a talk on something technical.
That seems like pretty good advice. That reminds me of what was that organization that Gant worked with? Toastmasters. That was just like a organization just about public speaking and getting good at it, and so they would do talks all the time. But I doubt it. Like I'm sure some of Gant's were technical, but I like the idea of, I don't know, getting used to it without having to like worry about all the extra stuff. It's like learn one thing at a time, like
exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that.
So I keep wanting to do like a lightning talk session with virtual coffee. That's like 5 minutes and talk about something you're interested in that's not technical. So I think it's also a really fun way to learn new things, and like, oh, that's the person that I can talk to about rock climbing or, whatever. One of the things that this reminded me of, and I wanted to talk to you about. So you're talking about this idea of speaking technically. And I think one of the things that I was told early in my career is not to do community, because women are often seen as, if you do community, then people only know you for community and they think that you're non-technical. So I wanted to get your take on that and kind of like what the balance is.
That's probably partly true, but part of me is like, I don't care because I want to help people. And if someone thinks that, running a user group is women's work. Well, that's really frustrating. I'm sure there are a lot of people who think that seems extremely real to me, even though the majority of user groups are run by men, who tend to get plenty of conference talks because they run like a massive user group or something. And I guess on the flip side, I actually think it was overall beneficial to me. It I don't want to say publicity, but I feel like it got me a lot of like sort of tech publicity in a way that I don't think I was necessarily expecting. So I would have people reach out to me that I don't think they would have if I wasn't so visible doing the work with PyLadies Boston. So I think it was overall good. I'm sure there were some people who are like, this person spends all their extra time on user groups, gross. But if it always feels like lose, like it's like you're supposed to do all of this stuff, and you are supposed to network, but you're also supposed to be coding like nonstop in your free time, which actually like that's another thing. I feel like I used to think negatively about networking, and I think it was PyLadies that changed my mind, and that's partly because I realized that really like I feel like real networking is building actual meaningful relationships, but they happen to be with people who are in your wow, I'm totally forgetting a word, but sort of like your work circle, that, and because I think sometimes people think like, oh, I'll just reach out to this rando on LinkedIn, and see if they'll refer me. That's networking, or I'll ask this random person I met once, about this company, and that will matter. And I'm like, that does not matter, but if you're actually building up relationships, like I've definitely really referred people to jobs. Like there's just like posting my referral link. I don't really count that. But in the first startup I actually worked at after I left the contractor that I was under with TripAdvisor, I referred the woman who was who stepped up to help me co-organize PyLadies Boston, because I was like, I, at this point, feel really strongly that I know her work ethic and I know that she would be an asset here. And so I advocated for her, and to me, that's what you really want out of networking. But you only get that if you build relationships and show people like what you're about and what you, I guess, like what you value. Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I want that person on my team. They're so great. Like I want to work with them. And you don't get that from a one-off interaction. And I think that's one of the things I liked about virtual coffee. I like that we do like the small breakout rooms. And I think it gives us a chance to build those like meaningful connections and make us more likely that in the long term, we'll be able to actually refer each other, and advocate for each other when trying to get people hired.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so true.
My list of virtual coffee members that I want to work with is very long, and it's all that. It's like the long-term, connections. The networking metaphor is interesting, it's like if you meet somebody once and then walk away, are they really in your network, But if you're like building a network on purpose, like that means strong connections, and that means, actually spending time and effort and on it, the term has gotten loaded with a lot of negative connotations for sure, like everything always does after a while. But it's one of the reasons why, like, LinkedIn is a dumpster fire, but like the fact that like the interesting part of the LinkedIn model is like the first connection, second connection, like that sort of thing, is like valuable information, or well, maybe not on LinkedIn, but can be, that sort of thing, right? You have like a strong connection with this person. I have worked with them, or I've, and then you're like, okay, well, if Becca recommends somebody to me that I don't know, well, like that person is going to be higher on my list than other people that I don't know at all, right? So it's like, sorry, there's somebody slamming doors outside, but yeah. So I don't know. I like the way that you were thinking about that. It's cool. It's interesting stuff.
You were saying you made a lot of connections through building community for people who reached out to you for jobs and things. I know that's certainly been true for me. And one of the nice parts of it is I have a whole group of people that I can recommend. And so I think, when you get to that point and people, then you make those personal connections. And it's really great to see, how far that goes out. I recommended a person for a job. They stayed there. And then when they left, they recommended another person. Right. And so then there becomes this whole cycle of, helping us advocate for each other.
100%.
So, okay. So one of the second pieces of advice I got after starting Virtual Coffee, and this resonated when you were talking about not making people pay for PyLadies, was, well, if you're going to do community, then you have to charge a membership fee, right? Like you have to get paid for your time. And that's something at Virtual Coffee that we've always had a strong stance against. We never want to make anyone pay for access to our community and the content that we produce, because I think it's important to allow that and for everyone in our community. So what was your, I guess, what are your thoughts on that, of like people have to pay for your time, I guess?
If it's not clear, I 100% agree with not. So with things being free. And here's the thing. To me, it depends on who it is. Like, if a company is asking me for advice, or someone is basically asking me to effectively consult for their work, yeah, no, pay me for my time. Like, I'm doing work to further the capitalist machine. Like, I want money. But when it comes to people who are potentially unemployed, and are just trying to better their own life situation, like, no, I don't want your money. Like, especially, I think, especially like where I was, like, Virtual Coffee is obviously a little bit broader, but at the same time, there are so many juniors in there. I'm like, I never felt right if my primary audience with PyLadies was people who are not developers. Being like, yeah, I'm a developer making, a good salary. Can you pay me to to help you get there too? I know you're not making that much money, but give some more of your money to me. Like, I don't know, maybe maybe this is like the socialist in me, where I was like, no, I want to help build people up. And I guess maybe I also like don't necessarily think that highly of myself that, my advice is worth money. Like, so I would feel really bad asking someone to pay for it. And the other thing is, I'm not necessarily creating the content, right? There were some times where, sure, like I was doing the class, I could have maybe charged for that. I still didn't feel right doing it. But for the most part, I'm like, other members are giving presentations. Why should I be paid for this? Like, if anything, maybe I could have been like, hey, I'll take donations for the cost of the meetup. But it's really like, even a meetup is only like, I don't know, like $80 every 6 months or something. It's not that huge in the scale of things, especially if you're making a software dev salary within the US. So I was just like, to be honest, it's not even worth it, because then I have to think about taxes, about getting gifts and paying. Like, to me, that's the other thing. I'm like, it's not even worth the potential tax headache of creating like a business and getting paid for this, when also I want to do this. I want to help people. Like, I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because, like, I think everyone should learn to code, period. But I also think being a software developer is a stinking easy job. Like, it's frustrating, but it's not that hard. And I think pretty much like anyone can do it. We get paid way too much, and there are too many jobs. Like even now, like where it's really hard for juniors to find a job. I know, but at the same time, it's because companies are like, oh no, we can only hire seniors. And they're an absolutely absurd amount. Like Amazon, which I'm pretty sure they wouldn't want to hire me anyway for a number of reasons. But like they keep emailing me, and I keep like this last time I think I responded back with, how do I get blocklisted by Amazon? Like, please let me know. I want to be on a block list. Which also, that is, I think, proof. Like there are a lot of people who think like, oh, if I do XYZ, like then this massive company is never gonna hire me. No. I have like a Twitter account that just like touts how great unions are, and Amazon recruiters are still like, want to work for Amazon? And I'm like, freaking no, I don't. But sorry, I just went
That was
off
fantastic. No, I loved it. I wish that everybody could have like watched you like give that speech there, because your body language was fantastic.
Oh man.
I'm just full of like rants and hot takes about tech.
It is my favorite. This is like when you're in my breakout room, I'm like, yes.
Oh man. Yeah. This podcast needs more hot takes anyway, I think, if there's one thing missing. I like I agree with everything you said though. And we, as people, like when you're running a community and stuff, you'll get advice or whatever. And part of it for me, the way I've been thinking about it, is like, it's not a product, right? We don't have people, you get people that come in sometimes to communities and want something and to, leave again, but I think that is another benefit of more intimate communities, is you get a lot less of that. If your group was just like people coming in and saying job please and then leaving, like all the time, then that's like, okay, let's turn this into a product and just like charge people, but it's not, that's not what like most communities are about. It's certainly possible to turn a community into a product and make money off of it. You see a lot of people doing it, but it's, I don't know. Then I start thinking of it as a different thing than a community at that point. You know what I mean? It becomes.
I feel like as organizers, like you also get a ton out of it, and I think that's the other thing that felt weird, because in a way I'm like, well, I'm probably actually getting the most out of this. Like, not only am I getting to constantly try to flex my mentoring muscles and get better at that, because I'm the one like making up the random extra time, I have to give way more presentations, and I'm still not the world's greatest public speaker, but did I improve drastically from having to give a bunch of mediocre presentations at PyLadies? Hell yeah, I did. And I was the one there every single month, which means I got to meet a bunch of absolutely amazing people. And so, yeah, it's like I'm getting more out of this than anyone else. Why should people pay me?
Yeah.
Also to basically just meet me.
Pay for your autograph.
Not worth it. I'll tell you right now. Don't pay for that pleasure.
Well, when you put it that way, and that makes me want to charge people. No, just kidding.
Just charge for autographs,
We told you we were charging for this podcast episode, right?
Right, yeah,
the bonus
one.
We'll
send you the bill after this.
It's okay. I'll send the same one. We can do, an in trade, in kind trade, for the pleasure of each other's company.
All right, so I'm ready for some more hot takes. So you have done a lot of work to get women and minorities into tech. So what are things that companies are doing that exclude women, or the red flags that we should look out for?
Well, my favorite is the stuff you don't get until you're actually there. And especially I think is specifically towards women, possibly some other minorities, but I think specifically women, where you get called like, you're more likely to be called like cynical, or shoot, I'm trying to think of another thing from one of my reviews, not at Splice, but at a recent company that will not be named. I had an article put in my review. Again, I'm a native US English speaker, on how to be more polite and tactful in American English. So I stop doing those things. Like, think about it, if you're
Did they
a
think you were like
manager.
Canadian or something?
No,
Sorry,
for sure not. But even if so, I think Canadians also like really yeah. And if you're a manager listening to this and have been like, well, I got feedback from this woman's coworkers on how she was so brusque, consider if that feedback might be gendered, and maybe don't give it to her, and tell the people who gave you that feedback that they should probably sit with their preconceptions of how a woman should speak. But to me, like, the biggest struggle, and I think why I've had so many trouble, is there often aren't a ton of glaring red flags in interviews. Because honestly, so you can't even count on diversity. One of my favorite teams that I worked on was me and all white dudes. But they were wonderful. Like, I still talk to a lot of these guys. They were the most supportive, I think, of almost any other team I've worked on. One of them would regularly, if he was working on something interesting, call me over to pair, be like, I think this would be really fascinating for you. Like, let's dig into this. And this was when I was only maybe like a couple years into my career. So like still pretty junior, like, edging into mid-level. I know at this point, like, people are like senior after 2 years, whatever. It's all meaningless. If you're senior after 2 years, where are you going? Like, your career is going to be like freaking 30 years plus years long.
Going to burn
you have nowhere to go at a certain point. That's another, okay. And versus a company that I worked at that was extremely diverse, extremely gender diverse, was like okay on gender issues, but if we brought up any sort of racial or ethnicity issues, it was bad. It was real bad. I was at one point accused of anti-Southern bias at that company. I am a Southerner, by the way. I grew up in Alabama, as I mentioned, lived in Georgia for 7 years. That's still most of my life. So I still very much identify as a Southerner. And yeah, because I mentioned something about long voting lines throughout the South. And I'm just like, well, I remember standing in a really long line in Atlanta. I don't know about you. Yeah. So I've basically found that I don't feel, and the other thing is even if you're trying to judge based on diversity, you might not even be giving correct answers. Like, when I asked at one point in one company I joined in the interview about like what, so like how many women they had in engineering, the guy was like, oh yeah, I don't have the exact numbers, but like, yeah, we have like women are in engineering management. And then I joined, looking at the org chart, and there are like 3 women in engineering, me, the other woman on my team, 1 person in QA. There is no one in management. I'm just like, what? So yeah, I mean, honestly, like, I feel like the big things for Conies, I'm just like, stop doing most of what you're doing. Like, it's all bad. But like, don't lie to people, because also if someone really cares about that, it's going to be put off and they're going to leave quickly. try to be honest about where you are. Like, this is for any hiring managers. Be honest about where you are and where you actually are trying to go. And the other thing is when people, women and people of color join your company and give you feedback on how the process is going, I think don't react negatively. Like, don't get defensive, because I think that's the hardest thing. Because I've been in many places where I've tried to be like, hey, I think we should consider doing this. And people have gotten extremely defensive. And it's like, if I didn't care, I would just leave. Like, I don't need to stay here. Like, I'm only giving this feedback and trying to make it better because I care about where I am, and I want this to be like a better place to work. I want people to love it, and I think a lot of times people miss that, that if you are giving, if you're trying to get involved and that's the other thing, don't necessarily make women and underrepresented minorities do DEI efforts, but also consider talking to at least some of them if you're considering implementing a change, because I've seen a lot of changes for the good of equity and diversity rolled out that were quite poor.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you have any advice for somebody who so maybe went through the interview, no red flags, landed in a position like that where they're uncomfortable? Maybe and I suppose the experience is going to be different if you're coming in as a senior or somebody, a little more comfortable. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I would imagine you would have no problem just quitting a job, right? Like if you're uncomfortable, but if it's your first job, for instance, your first tech job, especially something like that, do you have any, I don't know,
if it's your
advice?
first tech job, unless it's extremely toxic, just start applying. You got one job, you can probably get another. I would generally not recommend quitting before you have another job. I've only ever done that once, and it was a really, really, really bad environment. But I also talked to my husband about it and was like, can we afford to do this? And he was like, please, because I'm tired of you complaining about this terrible place. He still didn't get rid of me complaining about that for probably like 2 years because it was that bad. So if it's really bad, start looking for another job. Like if it's extremely toxic, if it's just a bunch of things where you're like, this is really annoying, try to buckle down. And, if it's your first job, even getting just a year of experience is going to put you in a better position to get a better job. And I generally don't think you have to stay at a job for a year. But again, when it's your first tech job, you need experience. So being able to stay, just suck it up. Hopefully people with more power in that particular workplace will speak up. The reason I try to speak up is because I am confident in my ability to quickly get another job if things go downhill. Do I want to be fired? No. But, do I feel like it's my responsibility for people who are coming in, who are more junior, who have less power, like to make sure that they're in as safe a work environment as I can make it? Yes. But if you are that person who's more junior, do not feel obligated to speak up because you're just not in the best position to do that. Once you start getting mid-level, senior, maybe start advocating for others a bit more, because it really is important that, we all, like, I don't think it should only be up to women and underrepresented minorities to call out racism and sexism in the workplace. And it can be a little frustrating when, I'm working with a bunch of guys and they're all really great, but, they're not dealing with the same crap that I am because they're not putting themselves out there and pushing back against bad policies. So,
Yeah.
but if you're junior, just hang on tight. It'll get better. Don't give up. Even though tech is mostly trash, like so are most workplaces.
Yeah.
Like you hear a bunch of people talk about quitting tech, and I'm like, but nowhere's better. Everywhere sucks.
Yeah.
My
Academia was awful.
yeah, academia. I always imagine just going into the woods, by myself. When I imagine quitting, you know, there's no people around in my imagined, ideal job, just trees and stuff. I don't know what the job is. I don't know.
You also
Forest
work
ranger.
with me. Okay?
I don't know who's gonna. Oh yeah, well you're fine, most times. But no, just kidding.
You
No, it's
can
just
go be
tech
a
is
forest ranger.
tech is forest ranger. I feel like I feel
There's
like
probably
you'd
still
end up.
trauma there.
Yeah, I feel like you just end up having to like be chasing kids out of the park that are smoking weed or something. I don't know, whatever. Like just just being like a security guard almost. Forest ranger. I need something. Yeah, I need like a trail maintenance in. I don't know where. That's somewhere far away, so I could just disappear for a couple months and then come back.
Rural Canada.
Yeah, I'll go up in Algonquin, something like that. Anyway, that's
I found
aside.
one of the things that's been helpful for me is in having a community and in having a network, there are enough people that I know or connections through people I know that I can ask what is this work environment like and get an honest answer. And that has been so important. So networking is important to find a job, but also it's very important to find a good job. And like, I don't mean pay, I mean a good place to work.
Yeah, and
So-
actually, that just made me think that another bonus is having people to ask advice of in if they're in situations, where they're not sure what to do or whatever. Actually having somebody who's been through that to ask is another bonus of community.
I think that can help, but caveat is like one of what was for me like one of the worst jobs I've had was at a place that friends worked at and they loved, and other people I knew worked at and loved. But like I ended up, not only did I get underleveled when I joined, and that's something that's hard to tell because every place's leveling is totally different, so I don't know until I join and I'm like, wait, what? Now I see everyone's levels. This is a little messed up. But it's also a lot of places are really dependent on your manager.
Right.
And so the people who were being like, oh, this is such a good place, they all had a different manager than me. And I did end up switching teams at a point, but like my original manager was really, really bad. And like that's sort of the thing with what I said about like Home Depot. I had net positive experience working there, partly because I did a coworker and I ended up talking to HR about our situation and they were able to remedy it for her, but not for me, because straight up part of it, I was like, well, I don't think this job is right for me. Like, even if I had a different manager. But I think my experience would have been totally different, and I probably would have stayed longer than like 8 months if I'd had a better manager that I know did exist there. So it really, I feel like it can help. It can potentially get you away from like really bad situations, but it's not a guarantee.
Right.
Which sucks. But it did help. Like one of my really good friends works at Splice, and we talked a lot before I even applied. And she was like, "Oh yeah, like here's the crappy shit that's going on, or that has gone on, is going on." And I was like, "Oh, that all actually sounds fine to me. Like none of those are deal breakers, So I'm good. I'll apply. That sounds great. Sounds so much better than now."
Trying to I don't even know. Are there any other hot take buttons we can push?
One hot take I'm planning it on writing on my blog is that which I think it's getting to be less and less of a hot take. It's good. Is that being a full stack developer is bullshit. No one no one is truly 100% full stack because it is freaking impossible, because it is hard enough to keep up with all of the front end things only, and it's hard enough to to fully learn a back end language, to get to the point where you're and optimizing your database. Like, it's hard enough to really gain any sort of expertise on either side. And anyone who says they're a full stack developer, I'm sort of like, but what's your favorite? Because that's what you're actually good at. And the other thing is just the thing you're sort of forced to do, and you're probably not doing it very well. I say that as someone who has been a full stack developer and has been poorly doing HTML and CSS forever. JavaScript, probably fine. Like, I've had to do it for long enough that I'm fine at it, but put me on like some real like front end, and I'm like, where's Bootstrap? Oh, I have to make a change to Bootstrap. Oh, let's not. Let's just make this super bootstrappy, and then we're good.
As somebody who's been like actual front end concentration for a very, very long time, I absolutely agree with you. Back end stuff is hard too, and it's hard to do it well. And there's so many. I don't know. I'm with you on it. If you need a pull quote or something,
maybe I'll ask for some pull quotes. That'll be fun. I'll ask that as a question in virtual coffee. Who wants to give me their hot takes on why being full stack is not real?
I think it's so hard to. There's a lot of like full stack boot camp programs out there, and then there are people coming out of those boot camps looking for full stack jobs, and I just struggle with that path because you're learning and you've just come out of a big learning experience, but it makes more sense to me to be able to focus on one aspect and understand the other for sure, but to really dive deep into that so you can level up and get to a mid-level position.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think what's really pushing this is companies who want just one developer who does their front end, their back end, and their operations. So, you should know HTML, CSS, React. I'm just going to go with, Rails, Ruby, Postgres, AWS. I'm probably missing a couple, probably a Redis. Gotta toss in Redis just for good measure, or something else.
Webpack or whatever. Well, I guess if you're Rails, you can use whatever ridiculous nonsense Rails does.
Hotwire now, I think.
Yeah, Hotwire.
No more.
I mean,
no more
like,
React.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's like how it always used to be, and then it wasn't, and then it was, and it's like there's this golden age where where there were really just back end and front end developers, because front end got complicated enough, back end was harder, and then it's just.
I think front end has always been complicated enough. I say that as someone who was like, sure. Messing around with my Angel Fire site when I was 13 and, trying to get scrolling text. Oh, yeah. I wasn't that great at it then. And to be honest, I really haven't improved that much.
Yes. Yeah.
I can get some solid scrolling text going by. That's about it.
Yes. It's dope.
My personal website is built in Squarespace because you know what? I don't have time for that shit.
Yep, that's what somebody was just asking about that on in Virtual Coffee. I think
was
like it's okay, like they're back end developer. It was like a Ruby developer maybe or something, and and they were just like, is it okay if I use a template or whatever? Yeah, I mean, my answer was emphatically yes. Like,
yeah,
I'm a front end developer. I use a template.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's whatever. I'm with you.
It decreases the barrier to entry for me. Like, I will sit there and trying to design. I'm not a designer, right? Or get all of the things right. It's too much work to have to think about that and figuring out all of the things. So, somebody has already done it. They have done it well, and it cost me $37.
Yep.
It's always hard to work on your own stuff too. Spend time on it.
Well, I think that's an excellent hot take to end on. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here and giving us all of your hot takes and sharing with us your journey. This was really, really great and a lot of fun. So thank you.
Welcome. I'm always here for hot takes. Anyone can hit me up in Virtual Coffee for the hot take of the day.
Yes. Yes, we need hot take of the day.
Well,
We
I
actually
just
should.
imagining like a lightning talks, except hot take
Yes.
lightning.
Well, if we're gonna do
That should be one of the weekly reminders.
Yeah.
What's your hot take of the week?
Ooh, I like it.
Well, we need a Slack bot.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh
wanna
man,
post it
yes,
now
I'll
that
add my
you
thanks
have
too. This was really great. I appreciate your time and appreciate you coming on.
All right. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Virtual Coffee Podcast. This episode was produced by Dan Ott and Becca Harrott-Weigel and was edited by Andy Bonjour at Good Day Communications. If you have questions or comments, you can hit us up on Twitter at virtualcoffee.io or email us at podcast@virtualcoffee.io. You can find the show notes, sign up for our newsletter, check out any of our other resources on our website at virtualcoffee.io. And of course, join us for our virtual coffee chats every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Please subscribe to our podcast and be sure to leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.